Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Russia accuses Syrian rebels of waging a terror campaign. The CIA expands its drone war on Yemen to unidentified individuals. And Pakistani PM convicted of contempt. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Russia has accused Syrian armed groups of waging a wide-scale terror campaign to kill as many civilians as possible. The Foreign Ministry spokesman said the armed groups are reverting to tactics that bear al-Qaeda hallmarks despite a ceasefire. Alexander Lukashevich said the armed groups are also trying to destroy infrastructure as al-Qaeda did in Iraq. He once again called on the Syrian army to fully implement the plan of joint UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan. His comments come shortly after the Syrian opposition called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting over what it calls crimes committed in Hama. The opposition has accused Syrian forces of killing over 100 people in the central city in recent days. Damascus has long blamed the bloodshed in the country on foreign-backed armed groups. Meanwhile, 442 Syrian refugees have reportedly left the camps in Turkey for their own country to fight the government. The return to Syria comes despite Ankare's commitment to abide by the UN-brokered truce that aims to bring the country's year-long unrest to an end. The move has renewed allegations that Turkey has been allowing its soil to be used for training Syrian armed groups. The allegations against Ankara have been reinforced as the return of the Syrian refugees coincides with Western calls for military intervention. The Turkish opposition has accused the government of turning into a contractor for the dominant powers in order to ratchet up the pressure on the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. The U.S. has approved the new authority that allows U.S. assassination drones to fire on targets in Yemen even when their identities are not known. U.S. officials say President Obama approved the use of signature drone attacks this month. The decision provides the CIA and the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command the opportunity to expand the drone campaign in the country. Official reports say U.S. drone strikes on Yemen's province of Marib this week was among the first attacks carried out under the new authority. The U.S. government has repeatedly been challenged over the legal grounds for expanding its drone campaign. A little over 3 years ago, dozens of people, many of them women and children, were killed in one of the bloodiest attacks in Yemen's Majala region. Jordan's prime minister has resigned amid growing disagreements over reforms in the country. Al-Khasawneh tendered his resignation to the royal palace on Thursday without revealing his reasons. Sources close to him have cited alleged efforts by the royal palace to undermine his attempts to introduce democratic reforms as the main reason behind his resignation. Khasawneh was appointed prime minister by King Abdullah last year to lead reform efforts. His resignation marks Jordan's fourth change of government since the Islamic awakening rocked the Arab world in 2011. A bomb blast kills at least 3 U.S. soldiers in southern Afghanistan. The soldiers were on patrol when the bomb went off in Kandahar province. Southern regions of Afghanistan, including Kandahar, are among the most dangerous parts of the country for the U.S.-led foreign troops. The latest deaths push to at least 130 the number of foreign troops killed so far this year. Our correspondent Kabul Faiz Khorshid earlier joined us with more on the attack on U.S. soldiers and other developments in Afghanistan.
It was a Taliban attack. The bomb was planted on the roadside by the Taliban militants, and the Taliban are saying that they killed over 10 American soldiers. But Afghan officials in Kandahar are saying that only 3 American soldiers have been killed in this latest attack by the Taliban militants. This bomb was planted on the roadside in Panjwai district of Kandahar province, the birthplace of the Taliban militants, and American forces were on patrol when their convoy was hit by this bomb, and 4 others have been also injured in this latest attack. No word yet on this latest incident from NATO headquarters here in Kabul, and it has been reported by the Afghan officials in Kandahar province. The Taliban spring offensive is now in full swing, and the Taliban are saying that they will continue with their attacks against American and NATO forces across Afghanistan. But let me remind you that it's not only American NATO forces who are increasingly being targeted by the Taliban attacks. Afghan soldiers are also paying the highest price for the US-led war now in Afghanistan. We have been told by Afghan officials that 4 more Afghan officers have been killed by the Taliban attack in northeastern Afghanistan. In Badakhshan province, the Taliban militants attacked an Afghan military outpost and killed 4 Afghan soldiers and captured 16 others.
زلزال سياسي بإمضاء قضائي في باكستان.
A political quake shook Pakistan. The Supreme Court convicted the Prime Minister of contempt for disobeying orders to file money laundering charges against President Asif Ali Zardari 2 years ago. Gilani was sentenced with imprisonment until the rising of the court. The ruling may lead to serious implications, which include a move to disqualify him from running for the Prime Minister's office. This places Gilani's fate in the hands of the parliamentary speaker. Mayub Khudr reports from Islamabad.
It's a decisive day in the history of Gilani and Pakistan. The Supreme Court convicted the Prime Minister of contempt and sentenced him to imprisonment until the rising of the court. Though it was symbolic, the punishment was not the end of the road for Gilani. This comes after the court referenced a constitutional provision, which may lead to disqualifying him from running for public office. With this, Gilani's headed toward a political and ethical crossroads.
He is a convict, therefore he is no longer qualified to stay in office. This issue will be decided by the Parliament Speaker. The court's decision means that Pakistan is about to enter a new phase of political instability, especially if the People's Party decided to appeal the ruling and challenge the judiciary.
During the more than 3 months of deliberations, the defense team has failed to prove Gilani's innocence of contempt for disobeying a court order, requesting him to reopen a Switzerland-based corruption case against President Asif Ali Zardari. Gilani, who refused to apologize to the court and described his ruling as inappropriate, seems to be placing himself in a serious position despite his party's support.
We will analyze each word said by the court, and then we will take the appropriate decision and respond. We respect the judiciary, and we have the right to appeal.
The right to appeal, if exercised by Gilani with his party's support, will grant him 120 days to counter the ruling. Meanwhile, the opposition seized on the court's decision and called for Gilani's immediate and unconditional resignation from office. This leaves the door open to all possibilities.
I think this is
a very historic decision which helped restore integrity to the judicial system. In order to solve this dilemma, Gilani must resign and the National Alliance must set an earlier date for parliamentary elections.
Gilani accepted to be the scapegoat, and now he's paying the price, rendering his political future ambiguous, especially if he's disqualified from office pending an appeal and an exercise of presidential privileges. Mayub Khudr, Dubai TV, Islamabad.
The Presidential Electoral Committee in Egypt announced a list of candidates running in the presidential elections, which are expected to be held next month. There are now 13 candidates after the Appeals Committee accepted Ahmed Shafiq's request. He had been disqualified on the basis of legal amendments adopted by Parliament and approved by the Military Council.
23 candidates had registered for the presidential elections. 10 of them did not meet at least one requirement needed for their approval as candidates. Today, the head of the Presidential Electoral Committee announced the final list of the presidential candidates. The list includes 13 candidates. The most prominent are Amer Moussa, the former Secretary General of the Arab League and a former foreign minister, and Abdelmonem Abou Fatouh, the former leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. The committee's surprise decision was allowing Ahmed Shafiq, the last prime minister during Mubarak's era, back into the presidential race after accepting his appeal. He was initially disqualified by the disenfranchisement law, which was adopted by Parliament and approved by the Military Council. The head of the committee said the Constitutional Court has the final say on the constitutionality of the disenfranchisement law.
Concerns over this exception should be taken to the specialised court for a verdict. In this case, it is the Constitutional Court. As for us, as the Judicial Committee overseeing the elections, we believe the election process should proceed on its normal path until the Constitutional Court issues a verdict on the issue.
The committee had flipped the political equation at the beginning of the month when it declined the appeals of the 10 disqualified candidates due to violations of the candidacy requirements. The most prominent of the disqualified candidates is the main candidate of the Muslim Brotherhood, Khairat al-Shater, the party's former deputy leader. Al-Shater, who was in prison until March 2011, was barred from running due to the legal requirement mandating that 6 years are needed before any prisoner can gain the status of rehabilitation and regain their political rights. The committee also excluded Omar Suleiman, the former intelligence chief and former vice president, who was disqualified for not having enough voter endorsements in some governorates. Salafi candidate Hazem Salah Abu Ismail was also excluded because his mother had attained foreign citizenship. The presidential map is more clear after the Electoral Committee's last decision, but there are no guarantees that all 13 candidates will continue in the race until the elections are held on the 23rd and the 24th of next month. We might witness new alliances or even withdrawals. Ahmed Maher, BBC.
Ahmed Maher, BBC.
Also in Egypt, the Salafi Front decided to endorse presidential candidate Abdelmonem Aboul Fatouh. This comes after the Presidential Electoral Committee rejected the candidacy of Salafi candidate Hazem Salah Abu Ismail.
The area near Ofer prison, located west of Ramallah, witnessed clashes between Palestinian youth and Israeli occupation forces. Israeli soldiers fired large amounts of tear gas at the protesters who organized a sit-in in solidarity with the prisoners waging a hunger strike in the occupation's prisons. Meanwhile, over 1,600 Palestinian prisoners are continuing their open-ended hunger strike for the 10th consecutive day.
The scope of the hunger strike continues to grow in the occupation's prisons as tensions escalate. This has become a familiar scene in front of the Ofer military prison west of Ramallah. Palestinians confront the soldiers by throwing stones at them, while the soldiers shower the protesters with tear gas, wounding some of the angry youths. The soldiers arrest activists peacefully demonstrating, and no one manages to avoid the tear gas and stun grenades. The confrontations took place after a sit-in was held to demand a response to the prisoners' demands. Nearly 1,600 Palestinian prisoners have been on a hunger strike for 10 days. One of their essential demands is to allow residents of the Gaza Strip to visit their children in the prison and put an end to the policy of solitary confinement.
Ahed has now been in solitary confinement for 2.5 years. We are in fact forbidden from visiting him. They're denied everything in solitary confinement except for being outside for 1 hour a day.
Besides these prisoners, around 25 Palestinian prisoners have been on hunger strikes between 1 to 2 months, demanding an end to the policy of administrative detention. Mohammed Al-Taj is one of the 6 prisoners who were transferred to the prison's hospital after his health condition deteriorated. He was arrested 40 months ago without any charges. He has endured solitary confinement and was denied visitations. So he started his hunger strike in mid-March, demanding to be treated as a prisoner of war.
I miss him a lot. I want to hold him. I want to kiss him. I want to talk to him and check on his health.
On May 2nd, the prison administration is expected to give a response to the prisoners' demands. However, in the meantime, it has imposed a series of punitive measures on the hunger strikers.
They have confiscated all their possessions except their clothes and a towel. They have also carried out a broad transfer campaign from one prison to another to destroy the foundation of the hunger strike that was built by the prisoners.
Israel encourages the harassment of the prisoners on hunger strikes, and as a consequence, more prisoners are joining the strike. The equation is unequal, but the balance may tip in favor of the prisoners, at least according to historical battles of empty stomachs. Shireen Abu Akleh, Al Jazeera near Ofer prison, west of Ramallah.
At 8 o'clock, a 1-minute siren will sound to usher in Memorial Day as Israelis remember 22,993 servicemen and women who have given their lives in the defense of the country. The siren will be followed by the national ceremony at the Western Wall in Jerusalem in the presence of President Shimon Peres and IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Benny Gantz. A 2-minute siren will be sounded tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning, immediately followed by memorial ceremonies throughout the country. The central service will be held at the military cemetery on Mount Herzl. Memorial Day will end tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock when a national torch lighting ceremony will take place at Mount Herzl to officially mark the transition to Independence Day celebrations. Palestinian terrorists in Gaza fired 2 rockets into Israel last night. No injuries or damage were reported in either incident. One of the projectiles slammed into a field in the Ashkelon Regional Council, and the other fell in the Shaar HaNegev Regional Council.
Israel does not have clearance to launch a military assault on Iran's nuclear facilities from Azerbaijan. That's the word from Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, who called the latest speculation science fiction. Speaking from the Azeri capital, Baku, Lieberman accused the world media of leaking information aimed at jeopardizing Israeli-Azeri relations. The predominantly Shiite Muslim country shares a southern border with Iran, and ties with its neighbor have been strained in recent months. Tehran has accused Baku of assisting Jerusalem in assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists. Still, Azerbaijan has fiercely denied reports that it granted Israel access to its military bases on the Iranian border.
Ethnic Armenians, along with other supporters, marched on the Turkish consulate in Jerusalem today to mark the 97th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. Protesters carried signs and shouted slogans demanding that the government in Ankara recognize the genocide, which began on April 24, 1915. 8 years later, more than 1.5 million Armenian men, women, and children lay dead. Survivors said most were massacred by the Ottoman Turks. The others died of starvation after being forced from their homes. Turkey has neither apologized nor recognized the genocide, claiming instead that the Armenians were victims of war. Saad Ibrahim told Israel Television's Osrius Elias why he joined today's protest.
I'm a victim of genocide that happened in Darfur, 2003. Unfortunately, this modern genocide happened in this century. And I came here to support the Armenian people.
I demand all the world to recognize the Armenian genocide, to put the Turks under pressure in order not to deny what they did for us in the 20th century, in the 1915 up to 1923.
The people of Bahrain continued their marches, demanding reforms and regime change. The village of Ad-Diraz witnessed a demonstration themed Cry of the Revolutionaries, demanding the departure of the Saudi occupier, the downfall of the regime, and the release of the movement's figureheads. And with a timid statement, Washington expressed deep concern over the escalating violence in Bahrain.
Peaceful popular marches continue. The people are insisting on attaining their demands despite the regime's systematic repression. This is a scene that Bahrain has become accustomed to 14 months after its people began the revolution. Massive crowds participated in a centralized peaceful march called for by Al-Diraz youth movement under the slogan, Cry of the Revolutionaries too. The march was held amid heightened security measures in Al-Diraz and was led by religious scholars, human rights advocates, and families of the martyrs, including the father of martyr Ali Mushaima, who ignited the revolution. With these chants, the Bahraini people demanded the downfall of the Al-Khalifa regime, whose hands are stained with the blood of dozens of Bahrainis despite being peaceful and having legitimate demands. Meanwhile, a large number of armored trucks belonging to the Saudi occupation and the regime's forces massed at the village's entrance to provoke the protesters who peacefully continued their march.
وطالب المحتجون بالإفراج عن سجناء الرأي وعلى رأسهم الناشط.
The protesters demanded the release of the prisoners of conscience, most notably human rights activist al-Khawaja, who has been on a hunger strike for over 2 months. In this context, al-Khawaja's wife expressed concern over her husband's health, confirming he has not called her since Tuesday. For its part, Amnesty International demanded the immediate and unconditional release of Zainab, al-Khawaja's daughter, after she was arrested last week for participating in protests demanding the release of her father. Her preventive detention was extended for 7 days. The Bahraini regime's aggressions have once again expanded from peaceful protesters and reached houses of worship as one mosque was demolished.
Just now, news is emerging of the demolition of Imam Hassan al-Askari Mosque in the city of Hamad, also known as the House of Flowers. And again, this is a response to the American authorities and a response to the United Nations.
على خط آخر طالب النائب المستقل علي شمطوط وزارة الداخلية.
On the other hand, independent representative Ali Shamtout requested the Interior Ministry quickly disclose those involved in the killing of martyr Salah Habib and bring them to justice immediately, regardless of their positions. He expressed fear of attempts to cover up for the criminals. The representative pointed to a parliamentary statement that confirmed Salah Habib's martyrdom was caused by a Shuzan shotgun, adding the incident took place as everyone in and outside Bahrain is observing the regime force's excessive use of force against peaceful protesters. He affirmed his complete rejection to using internationally banned Shuzan ammunition. Through a timid statement by U.S. State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland, Washington expressed its deep concern over the rising violence in Bahrain. The statement equated the victim and the executioner when it called for an end to the violence against the protesters and the police on equal grounds. Palestinian leftist intellectual Salameh Kaileh has been imprisoned once again for dissenting. For the first time, New TV will air parts of an exclusive interview we conducted with him in Beirut in this special report by my colleague Ghadi Francis.
Who are you with?
Dunya TV.
Leave me alone. I'll talk to you when you become humans.
We're independent media.
Independent? You're not independent. You're not independent.
This was a scene at the conference organized by opposition and independent figures at Semiramis Hotel in the heart of Damascus on June 27, 2011. The man had nothing to fear or lose. Salameh Kaileh is a Palestinian, Jordanian, Iraqi, Syrian, a steadfast leftist who is protective of the resistance. He has been living in Syria for 30 years and was imprisoned from 1992 to 2000. He got married while in prison. He wrote a series of articles for Al-Akhbar newspaper that included a rebuke of its editor-in-chief, Ibrahim al-Amin. Al-Amin wrote yesterday an article titled Free Salameh Kaileh that was featured on the front page of the newspaper after Syrian security decided on the morning of April 24th to imprison Kaileh again. So you're saying these things while you're in Syria?
Let's focus on our subject. You want me to talk about Syria? This is how you're welcoming me?
In an exclusive interview we held in Beirut in late 2011, Kaileh's opposition was made clear. He opposes both the regime and the opposition and is betting on the street.
It should be made clear that change was not aimed to establish a religious state or bring the Muslim Brotherhood to power. This point is clear. Another point is the issue of foreign intervention. We've had experiences in this arena, especially in Iraq. And it should be clear that we also want to liberate the Golan Heights and that the regime is stalling on the issue.
Who has the power to influence the street?
The street itself. Political parties don't have any real influence on the street, and not even the coordination committees, which have become part of the National Council. Their role is mostly played in the media. They don't play an effective role in the struggle on the ground. I am neither with the coordination committees nor with the National Council. I have serious objections to both.
Salameh Kaileh is a Palestinian intellectual. He was born in Birzeit. He'd studied political science in Baghdad. He then went to Jordan, since he has Jordanian citizenship. He has lived in Syria and in Lebanon. He worked with the Palestinian resistance and worked with the Arab left. He's obsessed with Palestine and obsessed with liberating Palestine. He doesn't believe in compromise. He doesn't believe in that ridiculous idea of a two-state solution. Even if a person is clearly hostile to the US and Israel, Arab regimes, and specifically the Syrian regime, are indifferent. These regimes are only concerned with surviving.
Under the leadership of Idris, as a salute to their comrade in the struggle, Dar al-Adab magazine is convening a solidarity gathering with the Union of Lebanese Democratic Youth in Tawfiq Dabbara Center Thursday afternoon. Those who smuggle, destroy, and infiltrate remain free. As for those who oppose the authorities, even if they are stronger advocates of socialism, liberty, and Arab unity than the Ba'ath Party itself, and work on new reforms, well, their fate is prison. Gadi Francis, New TV.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.